Hello, this is Ariadne Rainbird, and today I'm talking about modern perceptions of the ancient Greek goddess Circe or Circe. Circe or Circe is a minor goddess in classical myth who nevertheless has captured the imagination of ancient writers and modern writers alike as a multifaceted and potent figure. In Homer's Odyssey, she appears briefly as a dangerous enchantress who turns men into swine, but who nevertheless helps Odysseus on his journey after his sojourn with her, and both in ancient and modern literature she appears as a liminal figure embodying male anxieties about female power. Today she has been reclaimed, reinterpreted and expanded into a complex symbol across literature, feminist thought, modern spirituality and media. Her identity now spans multiple archetypes: goddess, heroine, witch, villainess, seductress, feminist icon, and patroness of herbalism and herbal magic. Circe has often been depicted negatively in popular culture, often as a seductive and powerful yet cruel and calculating female figure, and her character has influenced 20th and 21st century writers who have based characters on her, such as the character of Bella Cohen in James Joyce's novel Ulysses, written in 1922. Bella Cohen is a brothel mistress in a chapter based on Circe in Homer's Odyssey, and is presented as an imposing but manly figure who dominates and feminizes her client. Julio Cortázar in 1951 wrote a short story entitled Circe, which, although not directly about Circe herself, tells the story of a woman called Delia Mañara who lives in a shadowy world of perverse sexual gratification and power games, and gains satisfaction through dominance and power over others. Delia poisons two of her fiancés but fails to kill the third. A novel by David James Duncan in 1992, titled The Brothers Kay, describes one of the characters having a sexual encounter with a woman called Circe, who shows him his reflection in a mirror, where he appears as a pig, perhaps revealing his true nature. An animated series produced in 1998, Mythic Warriors, included an episode titled Ulysses and Circe, in which Circe is depicted as a villainess who tries to trick Ulysses rather than helping him. She is described in the cartoon as an evil being and a monster, and she turns herself into various creatures in order to pursue Ulysses. In this version of the Odyssey story, which is quite far removed from Homer's story, Circe tests Ulysses' loyalty to his companions and to his family, but Ulysses remains loyal and escapes her clutches. Circe also appears in the animated series of Walt Disney's Hercules in an episode titled Song of Circe. Here she is portrayed as a beautiful enchantress using her charms in a quest to capture the perfect man to be her boyfriend. No man can resist her charms, and she takes her pick of the besotted suitors. However, she soon tires of her choices and turns all her lovers into animals, keeping them in a cage. She is described as a beautiful yet dangerous, evil, mysterious, cunning, gorgeous and lovely, as the men become besotted with her and fall under her spell. In the Percy Jackson series by Rick Riordan, Circe is the owner of an island health spa who turns people into guinea pigs, which she says are more convenient and easier to look after than real pigs. Percy Jackson is amongst those transformed, and his friend Annabeth Chase uses magical vitamin tablets to restore him to his human form. Circe also appears in DC Comics as an adversary of Wonder Woman. Here she is in league with the goddess Hecate, who is also depicted negatively as an evil goddess of witchcraft and sorcery. Circe has also appeared as an arch-enemy of Superman after he spurned her love for him. Circe appears as a minor goddess with a human voice in Homer and other ancient Greek and later Roman texts, though it is unclear what is meant by this, and modern authors such as Madeline Miller in her novel Circe have speculated on the meaning and attempted to flesh out the character of this enigmatic goddess. Miller interprets Circe's human voice as being thin, that is, lacking the power of the voices of the other gods. My own opinion is that Circe's human voice means that she is a goddess who can talk to humans and who we can listen to and communicate with. Miller's novel takes the ancient and classical Greek myths and weaves them together into a compelling story to suit the modern mind, fleshing out Circe's character, seeking to create an insight into what her psyche may have been like, how she became who she was, and why she acted the way she did. Whereas the classical and Homeric myths give only a sketch of Circe's character, as a witch goddess who ensnares Odysseus and turns his men into pigs, giving no motives for her actions and not really allowing us to develop an understanding or sympathy for her, Miller brings Circe fully to life, as a passionate, intelligent, loving and wise and often wronged minor goddess, who is brought up to believe that she has no power, but finds her powers whilst in exile. Miller's Circe is a minor goddess, who lacks the power of the other gods or is made to believe that she does, is ignored by her parents and becomes an exile. The novel is told from Circe's point of view, in the first person, and begins with her birth. When I was born, the name for what I was did not exist. They called me Nymph, assuming I would be like my mother and aunts and 1,000 cousins. The opening paragraph tells us straight away how different Circe is from her family, and from any goddess or nymph who had been before her. It introduces right at the beginning not only her strangeness but her aloneness, which is a theme throughout the book. Circe is the daughter of the sun god Helios and the naiad nymph of fountains and streams, Perses, herself the daughter of the Titan Oceanos. Being the daughter of such powerful lineage, one might expect that Circe would have some power, but we're told that she has none, that her features are not pleasing and that her voice is thin. As such, she is an outcast within her family, largely ignored by her mother and sisters and barely tolerated by her father, whose attention she craves. The novel weaves in other classical myths not originally connected with Circe's story and makes them part of her story. For example, the story of Glaucus, a mortal who in classical myth chanced upon a magical herb which brought dead fish back to life, consumed the herb himself and became immortal. In this novel, it is Circe who seeks out and gives him the magical herb in order to turn him into a god. This is the first magical act which Circe performs, and is driven by her loneliness, as Glaucus, a mortal, had paid her attention, whereas none of the gods or nymphs did. However, once transformed into a god, Glaucus loses interest in Circe, and she is alone once again. Instead, his interest turns to the nymph Scylla, who is portrayed as vain and shallow, leading Circe to turn to magic once again, turning Scylla into the terrible sea monster that she is in the classical myths. Other mythic characters, such as Daedalus, Minos, Theseus and Ariadne, are also woven into Circe's story, as the goddess gets to know herself, come to terms with and embrace her differences from others, overcome her loneliness and find her power. Odysseus' story and character is given a different twist, and we learn why Circe turned the men into pigs and have a sympathy for her doing so. Her story also continues beyond the limits of the Odyssey and traces what happened after Odysseus' return to his wife and son, Penelope and Telemachus, and tells of her life with her own son by Odysseus, Telegonos. Miller's Circe is written in a captivating style with poetic and descriptive language which evokes feelings of empathy for the central character, which is generally lacking in the myths. Miller reimagines Circe, bringing her to life and telling us her most inmost thoughts and feelings. Miller creates a character which we can identify with, particularly if we have ever felt alienated, isolated or different. Other characters are described from Circe's point of view, how they act towards her and interact with her, although we also see how Circe's attitude and feelings towards certain characters changes throughout the novel, as more is revealed about them. The book explores the differences between the gods and mortals, as well as those beings who are in between, such as nymphs, but is set in a mythic time and world where gods and mortals could intermarry. Circe's relationships with gods and mortals is explored within the book, and her affinity towards mortals due to her rejection by the gods. The author gives the gods physical, though immortal bodies, with the divine substance equal for blood, as in the myths. In this world, gods can be wounded and hurt and even raped by mortals, although they are immortal, and a minor goddess or nymph such as Circe has little power to protect herself, except by the power of witchcraft, which she studies and becomes proficient in. Although of powerful parentage, Circe does not have the protection of her family, and is largely ignored by her father, the great god Helios. We see Circe's confidence and power grow throughout the novel. Much of the novel takes place on the island of Aea, to which Circe is banished because she is seen as a threat to the gods. Here she lives alone with only wild animals as her companions, and her ever-growing herds of pigs. We see Circe developing as a wild woman, alone in nature, defying the gods, protecting herself from men and living by her own rules. Here she experiments with herbs and plants, developing her own magic and spells. From time to time, sailors chance upon the island, and we see Circe's initial naivety change to savage self-protection as she learns that not all mortals are pleasant or nice. We see her develop as nymph, goddess, witch, lover and mother. Circe's story in Miller's book is relatable to women who have turned to witchcraft in order to find themselves and to develop self-confidence and self-empowerment. Miller tells a passionate tale of Circe's survival and growth in a male-dominated world, in which a minor goddess or nymph has little value to the gods except for her trading power, whether she will make someone a good match, whether mortal or god. Circe, unfortunately, is not seen as a desirable match for any, but her rejection and abandonment are what lead her to find her own power. There are also some comedic elements, such as Circe's son, Telegonus, being amazed that his mother had met characters such as Daedalus, who was a mere mortal, whilst being totally nonplussed that his own mother is an actual goddess. Miller's Circe is a tale of a woman coping and thriving in a man's world, although living in exile and always with a tinge of sadness and loneliness. It explores Circe's divinity as well as her connection to and sympathy for mortals and mortality. It explores what it is like to be different, to be the strange one or outcast of the family. Anyone who has ever felt different or misunderstood will relate to Circe, and Miller's Circe is a feminist icon who many women can relate to. Miller's portrayal of Circe has been influential on modern perceptions of Circe amongst witches and pagans. Among feminist writers and thinkers, Circe has become a powerful symbol of female autonomy, resistance to patriarchal authority, and reclamation of voice and narrative. Her exile is reinterpreted as a silencing of powerful women. Her magic as knowledge suppressed or feared by male-dominated systems. In this light, Circe's story resonates with broader feminist themes, the marginalisation of women, the reclaiming of identity, and the transformation of imposed isolation into self-defined independence. As a feminist icon, Circe's association with seduction is reinterpreted. In both ancient texts and popular culture, her sexuality is often portrayed as threatening or deceptive. From a feminist perspective, it is more commonly viewed as agency over her own body and desires, a rejection of shame associated with female sexuality, and a form of power that is neither inherently good nor evil. Rather than a femme fatale archetype designed to entrap men, Circe becomes a figure who chooses connection on her own terms. Dean Kalimniu in 2026 discusses Circe's role as a feminist icon who works within a patriarchal context, offering hospitality to strangers according to patriarchal obligations, but transforms that hospitality into a tool of sovereignty, where she is the mistress of her own domain. Circe lives alone on an island without a husband. She is autonomous and commands knowledge of herbalism, potions, and transformation. The rituals of welcoming strangers which she employs become a method of control and discipline, where food and wine are used as pharmaca, substances which can be medicines or poisons. Male expectations of hospitality on their terms and their freedom to leave when they please becomes reshaped to the will of their hostess. Circe's art, rather than being simply sorcery, is a disciplined expertise, coming both from her divine lineage and from her solitary years of study in exile. Circe is a goddess with an ancient lineage, as the daughter of the Titan god Helios, and exists outside the patriarchal ordered world of the Olympian gods. Her island of Aea is a liminal place, outside of the normal expectations of society and where normal rules do not apply, but transformations can occur. The hero is robbed of his power in the presence of Circe as she defines the terms of her hospitality and her relationship with the hero. Yet those who are transformed by Circe also eventually benefit from that transformation. Odysseus's men are younger, more handsome, and taller than before, once transformed back into men. As a goddess, Circe is revered for her divine association with transformation and magic, embodying the potent forces of nature and the supernatural that resonate deeply within modern pagan and witchcraft traditions. Her role transcends mere story, influencing contemporary spirituality, where she is invoked as a symbol of mystical power and divine feminine energy. In literary and popular media, Circe's portrayal oscillates between admiration and condemnation. She appears as a heroine, celebrated for her intelligence, autonomy, and subversion of patriarchal norms, qualities that align with modern feminist readings highlighting female agency in antiquity. Conversely, traditional narratives often cast her as a villainess, emphasising manipulation and danger to men, thereby perpetuating historical delegitimization of powerful women. Yet despite being a goddess specifically connected with witchcraft and sorcery, who has captured the imagination in popular culture, Circe has had surprisingly little impact upon the modern pagan and witchcraft scene. With little being written about her by pagan authors, either in witchcraft or Hellenic polytheism, some recent publications have begun to take notice of Circe as a goddess of witchcraft, notably the works of Cindy Brannan, who includes her as a companion and daughter of goddess Hecate in her Hecatean witchcraft. Brannan reimagines Circe as a chthonic or nature-based deity aligned with the rhythms of the earth, animals and instinct, a goddess who holds the secrets of transformation and knows the secrets of the dead. Her island, Aia, becomes not a place of exile but a sacred space, an autonomous domain free from patriarchal control. Brannan sees Circe's domain to be particularly over the realm of herbal magic, being the original witch to whom Hecate gave the sacred practice of pharmakeia, or herbal magic, and control of the spirits of the natural world. Brannan appears to draw from Miller's interpretation of Circe as a misfit who didn't fit in with her divine family, and whose human voice meant that she was seen as less than the other gods. Brannan also suggests that this links her to witchcraft, as witches are said to have voices which are different to those of others. Circe's feelings of differentness and otherness led her to learn her art of magic, her transformative powers and pharmakeia. She took advantage of her exile and differentness in order to develop herself, to study and to learn, using her isolation to connect to the natural world. Brannan sees Circe as both an upper-world goddess due to being a daughter of Helios and an underworld goddess, and thus represents opposites, a goddess who found her strength through weakness and was skilled in transformation and in the power of revealing things as they really were. Brannan suggests invoking Circe to connect to plant spirits when wild foraging, and also for magic aimed at getting to the truth of matter or to help one to speak one's own truth. Due to her connection with wild beasts, Brannan says Circe can also be called on for animal spirit work. Circe is often portrayed in popular culture as the archetypal witch, which has both positive and negative connotations. In both fiction and real-world spiritual practice, she represents mastery of magic and transformation, deep knowledge of herbs, potions and natural forces, and independence from societal norms. In contemporary witchcraft traditions, especially those influenced by feminist spirituality, where Circe is worked with, she is revered as a proto-witch figure, a symbol of female magical authority that predates and defies later demonisation of witches. Her magic is no longer framed as deceitful trickery, but as skill, knowledge and personal power. Circe's use of potions and plant-based magic has led to her modern association with herbalism and green witchcraft. Some modern witches who also practice as herbalists and who sell herbal preparations call on Circe as a patroness. She is often seen as a keeper of ancient botanical knowledge, a practitioner of healing as well as transformation, and a mediator between human and natural worlds. In this interpretation, her pharmaca, or drugs or potions, are not merely tools of enchantment, but symbols of deep ecological understanding. Some modern herbalists and spiritual practitioners may view Circe as an ancestral figure representing the lost or suppressed traditions of plant wisdom. Despite modern reclamations, Circe retains her shadow. In film, television and some literary adaptations, she still appears as a dangerous antagonist, a manipulator who ensnares men and disrupts heroic journeys. This version reflects lingering cultural discomfort with uncontrolled female autonomy. Her ability to transform men into animals is often interpreted as punishment or revenge, but also as a symbolic inversion of power dynamics. The modern Circe is not a single fixed character, but a multifaceted symbol shaped by evolving cultural values. She embodies contradiction, nurturing yet dangerous, solitary yet powerful, feared yet revered. Modern interpretations place her as a voice, a force, and a mirror reflecting changing attitudes toward power, gender, and knowledge. In reclaiming Circe, contemporary culture does more than reinterpret a myth. It redefines what it means to wield power outside the boundaries of tradition. Views of Circe amongst modern pagans have likely been influenced by how she is represented in popular culture. And for many modern pagans, unless they've studied the classics, modern representations of Circe are their only source of information. There's little written about Circe in modern books on paganism, other than that written by Cindy Brannan and a more recently published Pagan Portals book by Irisanya Moon called Circe, Goddess of Sorcery, which explores the myths of Circe and her ancient Greek origins, but is really quite a brief introduction, with short chapters on working with Circe for spell work and necromancy. Circe is a minor goddess in the Greek pantheon who appears in Homer's Odyssey, the Argonautica, the Aeneid, and other ancient Greek and Roman texts. She is portrayed as a sorceress or witch who has the power to transform men into beasts and back again, and to work powerful magic with the use of herbs. She is also concerned with purification, prophecy, and necromancy. Yet despite her close connection with witchcraft, little has been written about her in modern books on witchcraft, and she's seldom mentioned by Hellenic polytheists as a goddess who they revere. As both a Hellenic polytheist and a Wiccan, I'm interested in exploring how Circe was seen in the ancient world, and also how modern witches and Hellenic and Roman polytheists view her today, and whether she has a place in the spiritual practice of modern-day pagans. As such, I carried out a survey to explore modern perspectives on Circe from self-identified witches and Hellenic and Roman polytheists, as well as eclectic pagans, about her role in their practice. Exploring how Circe was seen in the ancient world and how modern witches and Hellenic and Roman polytheists view her today, and how much she has a place in the spiritual practice of modern-day pagans. My findings confirmed my initial hypothesis that very few witches and pagans actually actively incorporate Circe into their practice, despite her powers as a sorceress and witch. In recent years, a number of books have been published on the goddess Hecate, as well as there being many groups such as the Covenant of Hecate, Hecate's Crossroads, and the Hecatean Study Group, which have formed to study and honour the goddess Hecate, and there are now many pagans who self-identify as Hecatean witches. The goddess Circe, however, remains far less studied, less well known and less honoured amongst pagans, despite being described in ancient literature as being a witch goddess. Circe is a complex and multifaceted figure, and scholarly writings about her have mostly focused on the roles of women and attitudes to gender in ancient and classical writings. Modern retellings of her story, such as that by Madeline Miller in her novel Circe, have similarly focused on issues of gender and power. Whereas this is important, and these issues are also important for the study of witchcraft in general, I'm more concerned about the attitudes towards Circe as a goddess of witchcraft and magic and sorcery in the ancient world, focusing on Greece and Rome, and also what this means for modern pagan practice and the links between Hellenismos and witchcraft. And how can we incorporate Circe into our practice, both as witches and as Hellenic polytheists? I will be creating another video at some point in the future looking at ancient views of Circe. This current one is really focusing on modern views, but I will be examining the ancient literature in a later video. Thanks for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to my channel.